Have you ever looked at someone and judged them before knowing their story? It happens more often than we'd like to admit. But sometimes, the very person we underestimate ends up being the one who changes our lives. This story is about a wealthy CEO, a security guard who didn't fit into the corporate mold, and a life-threatening moment that flipped everything upside down. In Silver Heights, Arthur Kane was the big boss. He ran Kane Enterprises, a tech company worth billions, and everyone in town knew his name. Arthur loved two things: making money and letting people know he made money. He drove a custom-made car that probably cost more than some people's houses and always wore suits so sharp they could cut glass. But Arthur also had a nasty habit of judging people. He didn't just think he was better than others. He believed it especially when it came to people who didn't look or act like him. James Miller, the night shift security guard, was everything Arthur wasn't. James was black, soft-spoken, and kind, with a sense of humor that could lighten any room. But Arthur didn't see James's charm or professionalism. To him, James was just a lowly guard, someone to tolerate at best and mock at worst. One Friday night, Arthur walked into the office late, his face red with frustration after a botched business deal. As usual, James was at his post near the front entrance, sipping coffee and listening to some jazz on a small radio. "Evening, Mr. Kane," James said, tipping his head politely. Arthur didn't even look at him. "How can you sit there doing nothing all night? Don't you want something better for yourself?" James chuckled softly. "Better than this coffee? Doubt it." Arthur wasn't amused. "I mean a real job. Don't you want to stop babysitting doors and do something with your life?" James's smile faded, but he stayed calm. "Everyone's got their role to play, sir. This is mine." Arthur smirked. "Well, maybe you should aim higher. A man like you shouldn't settle for a job like this." It wasn't just the words. It was the tone, the condescension, the dismissal, the implication that James wasn't good enough because of who he was and where he worked. But James had dealt with people like Arthur before. He knew better than to argue. That weekend, Arthur decided James wasn't up to standard for Kane Enterprises. He called HR and told them to replace him. "We need someone more presentable," he said, "and younger. You know, someone who fits the image of the company." When James got the news, he took it in stride. He packed up his things, shook hands with a few colleagues, and walked out of the building he'd guarded for years. As he stepped into the night, he looked back at the towering glass building and muttered to himself, "They'll miss me when I'm gone." Fast forward a few weeks. Without James, security at Kane Enterprises went downhill. The new guard barely stayed awake on the job, let alone took it seriously. But Arthur didn't notice or care. He was too busy planning a big celebration for the launch of his latest product. The night of the launch, the office was buzzing with activity. Caterers set up champagne towers, executives in designer suits schmoozed, and Arthur basked in the glow of his success. But as the party wound down and the building emptied out, no one noticed the group of armed robbers lurking in the shadows. Around midnight, the robbers made their move. They cut the power, disabled the security cameras, and stormed the building. Arthur was in his office, going over last-minute reports, when the lights went out. At first, he thought it was just a power outage. Then he heard the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the halls. Panic set in. Arthur locked his office door and grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. He tried the landline. Dead. His chest tightened as he realized the robbers had planned this down to the last detail. He was trapped, alone, and completely vulnerable. And then, in his moment of desperation, he thought of James. Arthur dug through his desk drawers until he found the old business card James had given him on his last day. With trembling hands, he dialed the number. "James, it's Arthur Kane," he whispered, his voice shaky. I need your help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then James said, "Didn't you fire me, Mr. Kane?" Arthur swallowed his pride. "Yes, but please, James. There are men in the building. They're armed. I don't know what to do." James sighed. He could have hung up. He could have told Arthur he was on his own, but that wasn't who James was. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." When James arrived, the scene was chaos. The robbers were tearing through the building, looking for valuables. James assessed the situation quickly, using his police training to come up with a plan. He moved through the building silently, disabling the robbers one by one. When he reached Arthur's office, he found the CEO cowering under his desk. "Come on, Mr. Kane," James said, pulling him to his feet. "Let's get you out of here." By the time the police arrived, James had already disarmed the last of the robbers. The officers were stunned. "Wait a minute," one of them said. "Aren't you the guy they just fired?" James just shrugged. "I guess I'm still on the job." The next day, the story made headlines. Former security guard saves CEO during armed robbery. Arthur couldn't ignore the irony. The man he had dismissed as unfit had risked his life to save him. Humbled and ashamed, Arthur publicly apologized to James and offered him his job back, with a promotion and a raise. But James had other plans. He started his own security firm, hiring people who, like him, had been underestimated. And Arthur became his first client. So, what's the lesson here? It's simple. Don't judge people based on their job, their skin color, or anything else you think defines their worth. Respect is free, and sometimes it might just save your life. If this story moved you, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us to look beyond appearances and find humanity in everyone.